Hello, everybody. Hi, Viv.
Hey, Susie, just a few technical issues before we jumped on, if you've been wondering where we were. My phone's having an OCD moment, and so was I, obviously.
Well, apparently your phone may be on OCD, but your computer has shut down.
Hello, Europe. Are you still
Exactly.
you're in Paris?
No, no, no. I'm in Houston, so it would be very late if I was in Paris. I think it's
Oh,
11 o'clock in Europe right now, so it's a
right.
bit late there.
Okay. I've got
Yeah,
my continents mixed up. Anyway, that's what
it's
happens when you
okay.
have OCD.
Exactly.
So, what's
Yeah,
our
what is
conversation?
OCD actually? Well, it's about can animals suffer from OCD, but it's so interesting because Gary always talks about how some of the things that we label as disabilities for people are actually capacities and abilities that people have. And OCD obviously is one of those that is people that suffer from OCD have compulsive behaviors and all sorts of things going on. And and to someone who has OCD really severely, I'm sure they wouldn't appreciate to be like have a joke about it, because to them it's like it's so intense
Mm,
that they don't know how to change that. And I have seen dogs with behaviors like that. I've seen dogs that won't let go of playing with the ball, or that are just like
mm,
when they're into something, they will not stop. And you can tell that they won't even stop until they drop dead. And I have seen dogs really get overheated in the summer and all that with certain behaviors. So it's very interesting because, what is it that like makes it that compulsive where like you can't stop it, or it seems like you
mm,
can't stop it,
mm,
and so what is that, what creates that? And I have been kind of curious about that, what creates that in animals, because I mean, obviously, too, Viv, like when Gary and Dane talk about this in people, it's basically about being hyper aware. It
mm.
comes down to that kind of.
Yeah, and it's hyper aware of energies that may not be yours. And I think this is the thing with a label, quote unquote, like OCD. It's often misapplied and misidentified as a problem, as a disorder, when in actual fact, if the person or the animal is just hyper aware of energies and you've got the ability to look at it from a completely different perspective, it can create so much space and change. And it takes all the presumptions, but also the wrongness and the projections. Because I think for a lot of people, I've worked with people with really chronic OCD, and they've got enough going on in their own world without everybody else piling their judgments and their projections and their wrongness at them as well. Because if they're already aware and they're trying to deal with something, and then people come in with more projections,
Hmm.
does that create space and ease and lightness for the person and a way to just be with it and work out how to use it to their advantage? Or does it make it 10 times worse? So
Hmm.
for animals that are obsessive compulsive, again, people, owners, maybe unknowingly project a similar energy at it. They just, oh, it's just OCD, oh, it's just this, oh, it's just that, rather than, hang on, what if we could ask the animal a question? What are you aware of?
Hmm.
Is there a different way that you can be with that? So, and it could be something like, I've had animals that obsessively lick themselves to the point where their skin's raw. They've got these
Yeah.
raw open wounds, but they just keep going. And you
Yeah.
put a cone on them, or you try and stop them, and as soon as the cone comes off, they're back into it again. So what is it that we can offer people that will actually see if there's a change possible with this?
Yeah. That's actually a great question. And I think, one of the things obviously you do want to look at is like, for example, as you mentioned, the skin stuff, is this an OCD behavior, or is it actually created by something underlying that's a health issue? And you do want to make sure that you explore that, or even ask a question, because honestly, a lot of times you could waste a lot of money at the vet, like really trying to come to the bottom of something like that when it's really not even an issue from the body, but it's actually a psychological issue. So please ask a question and please trust your awareness with this, you and your animal. Please, 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 and it's not about making anybody or anything wrong. And I'm not talking about don't go to the vet. Please don't take that out of this call, because that's not what I'm saying. But for me, it's a lot of times we come to conclusion, oh, I have to go to the vet. Well, yes, maybe that is true, and maybe that is correct. And then sometimes maybe it's not required to do that. But please ask, is this a health issue? Do I need to go to the vet for that? Do I need to address it in any other way? Or what is actually the underlying issue here? And then, some of it, like Viv, like you were saying, if it's about having all this hyper awareness and just like being so aware of everything that's going on, then creating a bit of space for your animal. And how do you do that? Like, we have this beautiful video that we actually did together too about expanding the zone, and we can put a link in here too to kind of give you guys that video of like expanding the zone on your animal. That would be one thing I would really like to actually introduce you guys to first. And then a lot of times it's also about like, hey, can you actually interrupt the behavior and offer something else? And I don't know, I mean, Viv, maybe you have some grand and glorious ideas too, because you have worked with people. And I get some of these things are similar just because it's an underlying energy that is creating it.
Yeah, I mean, I had one young man, he was probably 21, and he would literally be so terrified of outdoors. And it got to the point where he became so terrified of other rooms in his house that he would lock himself in his bathroom, in the family bathroom. And I'm talking for 8 or 9 hours. And long story short, his mum managed to get him to come and have some sessions with me. After the second session of running his bars, he was out amongst the house again. And this day, I think we did maybe 5 or 6 bar sessions, but we used the verbal processing as well that shifts the energy, the access verbal processing. And he's now driving a car. He's not got a job, but he's working as a volunteer at the local horse sanctuary, going around picking up poo, assisting the woman, and she works with people with, disabilities, quote unquote. So the verbal processing from access consciousness can shift so much. And it's about asking the animal a question and just not having a point of view and using the access clearing statement. So if you want to know more about that, go to theclearingstatement.com. You don't have to understand it. It doesn't have to make any sense. Just try it. What's the best that can happen? Because it's the energy that keeps people stuck. You can mentally try and psychologically process OCD in your head, but it's energy. Yes, the thoughts and the feelings and emotions may trigger it and add to it, but it's a physical reaction. And so, like you said, Suzy, changing that pattern, interrupting the pattern, and people try and distract. People might be OCD or animals that are OCD. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So with an animal, if they're obsessed with the ball, like you were just saying, they may not be interested in anything else. So it can get really frustrating for the owner, or upsetting, and just, what do I do with this? And people just succumb and they put up with it. But they somewhere in their world still desire to change it. So that's the first thing would be watch the zone video, expanding the zone, and check out theclearingstatement.com and just run it over and over and over again. What's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? Nothing changes, but
nothing changes.
Something could change. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. And also, I did actually many years ago, I made like a little obsession series, and it's funny because I gave it to a few people and I didn't hear back from them. So either it worked really well and they just never bothered to tell me about it, or it didn't work at all. But I'm willing to actually give you guys the link and have you and the animal listen to that, because
that's awesome.
That's basically maybe something that might be a contribution, and who knows, but it gives you and the animals some tools to kind of work with, like interrupting the behavior, possibly offering some other behaviors that you could use instead. Like, so gently getting them out of what they're doing and also showing them what else they could be doing, but also then really not buying into that it is something bad that needs to keep going on. Like a lot of times, we have to kind of also be willing to see that we can change something, and sometimes we get so stuck in, well, this is the way it is, and oh, we can't change that, that's just the way my animal is, or whatever. And you don't have to be in that position either. I love the birds.
Yeah, they're adding their contribution. Yeah,
Exactly.
and the thing is that it's not fun for you as an animal owner or carer. It doesn't allow the relationship be what you desire it to be. And the same for the animal, it's probably not much fun for them being stuck in that loop or that behavior, because there's so much more available, when there's a light, like you said, Suzy, a lightness and a space, something can change. But the other thing too is that we often unknowingly add to that, like I was saying earlier about when people judge other people, or they, start, making comments or whatever. When we have an energy that comes up, if your dog is obsessive and that same pattern, that same feeling, if you like, comes up in your world, how do we interrupt that for you as the owner too? Because it's not, you can see that it's happening, and some people are oblivious to it, but other people are aware of it, and they do have a desire to change it. So I love your generosity, Suzy. It's just and this is the thing, it's like there's that desire to contribute, to make things more ease, a greater possibility, more enjoyment, because if you're enjoying your animal, they're enjoying you, and happy days, that's part of the reason why we have them in our lives, to enjoy them.
And sometimes it can be like, as you're saying this, I just have this wonderful little story, but it's not necessarily totally about obsessive behavior, but kind of, because I used to be a dog walker many years ago, and I had this one dog that, unbeknownst to me, was always running away from the house, that basically the owner's house, and anytime they would just leave the door open by a crack, or anywhere the dog would find a way to run away, she would choose it. But they didn't tell me that. They hired me to walk their dog. So I was going to the beach with this dog, and she was great. And then one day she just started bolting, and she ran. And I mean, I freaked out, because in my group of dogs, I have older dogs and I have all sorts of things going on. I can't just run randomly after another dog. Like, I have to worry about everyone else. So I was tying everybody up to a tree, and I was just running after this dog, right? And I was exhausted, and I did catch her, and I, had a leash. I brought her back to my other dogs, who were also going cray-cray because they were tied to a tree. So, I mean, it was like this endeavor. So she did that repeatedly over that first month I had her, or whatever. And so I was like, look, after that last time I caught her, I just literally said to her, hey, look, this does not work for me. This is not, like, you have to stay within this bubble. And I showed her the bubble. And I said, if you do this again one more time, I will never walk you again. And I was for real. This was not an empty threat. This was a for real, like, you are not my client, and you can stay at home as long as you want to. Like, I will not ever walk you again. And it was funny, because she changed that moment, and she never ran away again. And I found out months and months later that this was the big issue why they hired me in the first place, was to walk her, because they couldn't take her on any walks because she wouldn't stay around. They didn't tell me that before I got her. But what they told me after 3 months was that she wasn't running away from home anymore.
Yeah, wow.
And then they moved to a new place where they had this fence that was like this itty bitty fence that she could literally step over, and she never left the home. Like, that changed her life.
Wow.
That one talk changed her life. Yeah. And so, did I know that when I went in? No, but it's sometimes it's so incredible, like you just telling an animal, look, this doesn't work, like, hey, this has to change, this is not fun. And but then they enjoyed their dog so much after that, and she actually became a therapy dog in the end. Like, I mean,
Oh,
it was a fabulous story, really, and all from just me saying, look, this doesn't work.
you being the leader.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
anyway, but it's just funny, like we sometimes assume that our animals don't understand, but you have to keep it really real, because if you threaten your animal with an empty threat, it
Mm.
energetically, it's literally like saying blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was for real. I was literally like, no, this is the last time. Like, I'm not doing this again.
And just to add to that too, Susie, it's like everything is energy, and animals' language is energy. They learn English, Spanish, French, whatever your native tongue is, but energy is the language that they understand. So with your directness, Susie, it's like, this is not negotiable. This is the deal. Here it is. Your choice.
Right.
And just that, I mean, you weren't angry, you weren't, expecting anything. There was no agenda. It's just, hey, look, I'm here to walk you, but this is the deal.
Yep.
And when you're that clear, when you don't have any of your own stuff in the way or any of your own emotions, which I get, if you are an animal owner, there is a relationship that's built up that's different. It's like having kids and other people's kids. It's a different relationship, but it's the same clarity and the directness of the energy. And the dog got it and made a choice. And this is the thing, animals do make their own choices. They do make their own decisions. And sometimes they can get stuck in those decisions. So, for your animals, what can you be? What energy can you be that can change whatever it is that's not working for you? And just asking that question, what energy can I be that will change this? And not from expectation of yourself or, having an agenda, but just asking the question, being curious, what energy could I be? Because that might be a completely foreign concept to anybody that's new, that's come across us and listening to the Talk to the Animals tools. But it's just asking that question. How do you get what you want in life? You ask a question. There's a curiosity, there's a wonderment there when you ask the question. So try it with your animals, see what happens.
Exactly. And like we've said earlier, and please, you guys, it's really not about you're a failure if something doesn't change. Please keep at it. Don't give up, because all these tools, any tool that you get from anywhere, may not work for your situation or your animal. Please don't make yourself wrong. Just keep at it. Like, hey, what else? What else? What else? So that you really have that sense of like, hey, look, we can change this together, but it has to change. And so the more you also have this demand for yourself, and that is really really a very, very important part of the puzzle, is that you are also very clear that this has to change. Because if you are sort of wishy-washy about it, again, you have to have the energetic demand that is behind all that, because otherwise it becomes an empty threat. Like, there's nothing there. You have to be congruent. So if it's really something where you're like, you know what, this has to change, and or else, like, and really kind of pick some or else that actually also is for real for you. You can't say, I'll bring you to the pound, when you would never do that. That doesn't work. But what actually is the threat that you could make that is for real? Like, hey, this isn't working and blah, 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 So, and I'm not saying make threats that whatever are life threatening. That's not what I'm talking about. But please just be for real with whatever it is that's going on for you. And maybe this problem isn't as big a deal for you, and you're just like, I don't really care. I like my animal the way they are, and I don't care if they're doing this, and they could do this for the rest of their life. That's cool too.
Yeah, and I think that's the trick for a lot of people. We get so easily distracted. The latest shiny object comes along, but it's like with your kids. Are you good at setting boundaries? Are you good at letting them know what works and what doesn't work within the family? It's the same with your animals. They're part of your family. They are an extension of your family. So same thing. And going back to the obsessive thing, it's just, again, not going into the wrongness of that as well. It's what are you aware of? Ask your animal,
Yeah.
what are you aware of? Are you trying to heal somebody? I mean, this is another massive doorway to open too, because our animals are so aware of energy, and they could be trying to be the conduit for changing something in the family household too, you know. So it's not just jumping to the conclusion of, oh, there's something wrong with my dog. There's infinite things that your animal or cat or whoever it is, horse or whatever's got the obsessive stuff going on. What are they aware of? If it wasn't a problem, if it wasn't a disorder and it was a capacity, would you look at it differently? So just one last thing I want to say is, I've heard Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, and, he wrote the book Talk to the Animals. He talks about, instead of OCD, disorder, he talks about OCC, obsessive compulsive creator. So instead of those energies being a disorder, if you could channel those energies into another creative direction, what could be possible? And the 21-year-old I was talking about earlier, we spoke. His father was actually a very, very well-known jockey in Australia. And he won the Melbourne Cup, actually, and which is like the big horse race of Australia. But he had this thing about horses, but because he was so trapped in the house, he couldn't get anywhere. And so when we were doing the sessions with him, part of his thing was, I'm like, well, what would you love? If you could have anything in your life, what would you love to have? He said, I'd love to have more contact with horses. He said, I don't want to ride them. I'm not, he's like 6 foot something, so he's not going to be a jockey. But he said, I just love the energy of horses and being around them. And so look what he chose.
Yeah.
So
how does it get better?
Obsessive compulsive creator. He chose to use that energy and put it in a different direction, which is kind of what you were talking about earlier, Suzy, with distracting the animal. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you've got other choices. That's the main thing, Suzy, that we're putting forward. You've always got other choices. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. What else is possible? Truly.
Yeah. What else is miraculously possible for you and your animals?
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you,
Well,
Suzy.
thank you. And thank you, Viv. And catch us again. We're going to be live again next week. So catch us when you can. And we're talking about, what are we talking about, Viv? Our next one.
Do animals miss us?
Oh, yeah. Do animals miss us? Oh,
yes.
Certainly they do. They cry all the time, don't they? All right. Okay. We'll see you next time, guys.
Thanks for watching. Bye, Suzy.
Bye, Viv. Thank you.
Bye.